Hey everyone, it's Jeneen, your host for Candidly Single Mom, where we talk about all things single parenthood journey. And I am here today to talk about my journey as far as me being a single parent, which I have been for 13 years. And as I was thinking about this particular episode, I really was looking back and having this thought or understanding that the journey that I've been on is all that I know. So when I talk about being a single parent, when I talk about, which we'll get more into co-parenting and my experience with what I thought was co-parenting, this is all normal to me. And when I've talked with my kids, this is all they've known. They've known a separate household where their dad was in one household and they were with me for the majority of the time as a norm. So when I think about having these conversations and bringing other single parents on and then kind of considering my journey, which has been for a long time, I don't know anything different. So I'm finding sometimes the struggle of sharing my story and trying to be very transparent, trying to be very open about the things that I've experienced, but then also saying it in a way where some of the things that I've experienced and had to deal with was not something that an average family experiences or should experience. Some of the things that I've experienced over this journey are things that I should not have. But again, this is me kind of being in survival mode. And even to this day, I feel like there's some aspects of survival mode. I feel, with me and my kids that I have sat in a place where it's just the three of us against the world. So anything or anybody that's outside of the three of us are considered strangers to us. And that includes family. So a lot of it, in order to kind of preserve myself in the process of healing in the early years of me being a single parent, was to cut everybody else off, was to create a wall where people couldn't get in, because you have to kind of understand and remember, even in the 8 years that I was married, there was a lot of more of an emotional type of abuse that was going on, with him cheating throughout the marriage and lying very convincingly about it. But then, me finding information out and just going through that repetitive cycle over and over and over again and having to heal through all of that. And if I can't trust the man that said the vows and stood in front of God and family and vowed to love me till death do you part, if I can't trust that individual, who am I going to trust? Who should I trust? So in those early years of me being a single parent, there was nobody that I really trusted. And I talked about in the last episode, the importance of having a village, which I really believe is super important. But the struggle that I had in trying to establish a village, and the only way that I knew to establish a village was going to church, trusting people through church. And the majority of my village, to be completely honest, were other single parents, other single mothers in particular, because we knew what we were experiencing. We knew the struggles. We knew the setbacks that we had to try to dig ourselves out of, the heartbreak that we had to encounter with dealing with the other parent and not getting the support that we needed from the other parent, healing from the broken relationship and feeling as if something was wrong with us, but still you have to parent your kids and then still you have to go to work and all of these things that we had to do. But because they had a similar or familiar experience, those were really like the core group of individuals that I trusted. I've had other friends and other people that came and supported me, but again, not at the level of trust that I had other people. So I had people in tears, and even my family, like some of them were like way out there. And I wouldn't let anybody in. It was just me and my kids, anywhere I go, my kids were going to go. And that's even to this day. Like when for Easter, and my son can drive, right? So my daughter, she's, hopefully she'll learn so she can get a little bit more independence. But just the three of us, going to church together, the three of us going out to eat together, the three of us. And I live around family. I have family here. My parents are like 15 minutes down the road, but I've created this lifestyle for me and my children to where it's just the three of us. And again, it's a protective measure. It's a self-preservation measure that I'm beginning to realize that I stepped into. And because I've done it for so long, to kind of break out of it is almost a hard thing to do. So, that's kind of a long sidebar of maybe where I'm at today, trying to break out of familiar patterns that are no longer serving me, familial patterns that are no longer serving my children, and really dialing into being more open to relationships. And these are, the mutual beneficial relationships, friends, or what have you, even kind of reigniting relationships with family. So that's where I'm at. But today, I want to talk more specifically about co-parenting. And again, as I was thinking about co-parenting, thinking about some of the conversations I've had with people in the past about my relationship with my ex after we went through the process of divorce, I always presented myself as if we were actually co-parenting, but really we weren't. When we went through the process of divorce, I had and have full custody of the kids. But even that part of it, when we were going through the divorce process, I was the one that initiated it, of course, paid for everything, of course. Thank God we didn't have any specific things that we had to divvy up and all of these things. But it was really like a cut and dry, easy process because he did not fight for anything. The court dictated based on how much expenses were and how much I made and how much he made, what the child support was going to be. They had that in the court order. The court dictated based on the fact that my kids were younger that, the kids are going to be with me and it was going to be full custody. And again, he just showed up by himself and it was a cut and dry process. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't fight for anything. He just agreed to whatever. And, I'm not kind of questioning that or wishing that he would have fought for anything. I think at that point I was done for sure. And I just wanted to live my life. I just wanted to raise happy and healthy kids. But then there was a part of me that wanted my kids to be able to still have a relationship with their father. And so we're talking, 13, 12 years ago that we went through that divorce process. But I think when it comes to the court systems, and even now when I talk to other parents that have gone through divorce, especially, and trying to make sure that there is a happy medium when it comes to co-parenting, that they are a little bit more sophisticated, that they consider a little bit more processes when it comes to co-parenting, the type of co-parenting being very specific in that. And so I'm a little removed from what was decided for me and my family. And I'm fully aware that what I did, and it really was me in regards to co-parenting, is not going to be the same for other parents, single moms, single fathers that are co-parenting with the other parent. So let's just kind of get into it. Co-parenting is defined as the process of separated parents continuing to raise kids together, even if they have separated as a couple. And so instead of them being in the one household, they're in separate households, but the care for the children and the level of care still remains the same. So when it comes to the financial aspect, when it comes to the care of the child physically, mentally, school, after school activities, all of that, both parents are still involved in that aspect, but they're just in the separate households. So you have to understand when you co-parent, there is a level of communication that needs to be had. But what do you do when you are still healing from the ending of a marriage, the emotional abuse, in my sense, that was occurring because my ex was cheating? And now you have to communicate with this person in regards to your kids. When somebody does you dirty, when somebody does you wrong, oversteps a boundary, really the natural thing that we do is to cut that person off completely. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. If you weren't once my friend, now you're kind of considered my enemy. I'll love you from afar, all of these things. But when you have children with that person that has offended you, hurt you, abused, you no longer trust, have distrust, overstepped a boundary, whatever the case is, it's like, okay, I can't completely cut you off. I still have to communicate with you. I still have to allow you to be in these children's lives. Now, if there's physical abuse and things like that, of course, we're not going and talking about that. But, when it's a a separation or a divorce based on infidelity, and we're no longer going to be together, but I'm still trying to heal, and I really don't want to communicate with you, but I still have to communicate, and you still have to kind of be in my life at least for the 18 years, when my children turn 18. But I hate you, but you're low down dirty fool, all these things that you're thinking, and you're having to heal from that. How do you co-parent effectively? How do you communicate effectively? And I think that's probably one of the things that, even through now courts and through advocates that help with the co-parenting aspect and come in, and even through counselors that come in, that they have saw that this is something that is a necessity, to where the parents can come together and say, okay, it's not about us. Even though I hurt you, even though you hurt me, and we're no longer together, we really have to do what's in the best interest of the kids. So I understand that there are things that people do, and there's a way to co-parent, have co-parenting relationship and co-parent in a healthy manner. But my experience was not that. We did not co-parent in a healthy manner because honestly, he wasn't involved. When we went through the process of divorce, I made the decisions as far as what was going to happen with the kids. Even though the court decided that he would have access to the kids maybe every other weekend and certain holidays, like they got specific into that. We didn't follow any of that. What I decided to do, and again, he moved back to a hometown, so he was an hour away. So what was decided, and what I decided, was for co-parenting, he would get the kids during the summer. And it wasn't something that I really wanted, to be completely honest. It was something that I just felt like I didn't have a choice, because when you have somebody leave, they're leaving and they're taking their financial contribution as well. And so with my kids being younger and my daughter being in daycare full time, and then when my son was out of school for the summer, he would go into the same daycare. There was no way during that time that I could afford the cost of daycare. And so the only thing that I could do was to see if he was able to watch the kids for the summer. That was a hard decision to make because my kids were younger. And because I'm the primary caretaker, even when he was with us and we were in a marriage and together, I was the one taking care of the kids, making sure that all of the things were done. They were fed, they were clothed, they got up early, and all of these things. And he would help, right? But as far as me being hands on versus him, I was more hands on. So for me to give up my children in a way for 2.5 months was very hard for me to do. But financially, I could not afford to put my kids in daycare. And financially, me asking him to do it, that was a fight. That was a fight because he was not giving, as far as his support, what the court had ordered for him to give. And that's a whole other conversation when we talk about child support and the whole process. As far as what I did, very unconventional. Like my path, what I did, y'all don't ever follow. Like, make sure you get the courts involved, have your documents, have things signed, because it kind of alleviates heartache and heartbreak. But I just wanted to make things easy. I was in survival mode. Let me just kind of appease and just let him have the kids for the summer. The only saving grace in regards to my kids being down with him for the summer was the fact that my parents lived 5 minutes away from him. And so I knew if anything were to happen, God forbid, my kids were there with my parents were there actually. And my parents, of course, they raised 4 kids. So of course they know how to take care of 2 additional ones. So they were super involved when my kids were with their dad for the summer. And I made a point to him to say, okay, if my kids are going to go down there and stay with you for the summer, then that means on Sundays that they have to go to church with my parents. Very big into making sure that my kids were going to church. He didn't go to church. So that was kind of what we did and what we gravitated into. So it would be during the summer months. It would be during the holidays. So like the big Christmas holiday. And it was based off of my work schedule. So if I couldn't get off work, if I couldn't get an extended period of time off, then we would meet halfway. he would get the kids and he would have the kids, or I would be down in the hometown for Christmas and then I would drop the kids off at his house. Again, it was just something that I felt like I had no other choice to do. In my preference, I would have had my kids with me the entire time, but financially to be able to have my kids in daycare or something like that, aftercare, I couldn't afford, and he was not going to pay for it. So, that was that. But another thing that I've kind of realized when it comes to the co-parenting, there's still an attachment that you have with this individual, or that I had with this individual. And so trying to separate, like when you divorce somebody, you still are attached to them. There's still a physical, there's still a spiritual or soul attachment that you have to this individual. So in those earlier days, I'm still kind of worried about what he's doing, worried about the women that are around my kids, worried about whether he's, drinking or doing things around my kids that are inappropriate. So I would be calling and just making sure, like, sir, like, the kids are there. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. And just making sure that my kids are in a safe place. And I tell you, the prayers that I prayed over my kids when they're with their dad, like, I would go in because I just wanted to make sure that my kids were safe. And if my kids are out of my sight, I tend to gravitate to thoughts of, okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if my kids are safe. So, the only thing I can do is pray. But one of the things I noticed over the years that we kind of were in this co-parenting relationship was that every summer when the kids would stay, he would have a girlfriend at the time. And, it depends on the summer. It'll be one girlfriend or it'll be somebody else different. And I talked to my daughter about this recently, and even my son, we have conversations about this together, at the fact that, he really was there when they were there at the house, but it wasn't him kind of taking care of them. So there would be a female that would be there, a girlfriend of some sort that would be there, that would be the caretaker. She would have kids. And so it'll be my kids and her kids. That would be at the house, staying at the house. And she would be, feeding, taking care of my kids and stuff. And, my daughter even alluded to the fact that at times when the kids were asleep, they would go out. So the kids would be home by themselves. And this is when my kids are a little bit older. But I realized that, when you're co-parenting, there are certain things that you want to communicate to the other parent as far as your kids' school, the issues that they are going through, their grades, or, I want to make sure that Isaiah can get into football, or he's interested in basketball, or he needs to go see the doctor, or, get a checkup and things like that. We didn't have those conversations. I was the one that took care of all of those things. And I realized that he was more of a babysitter during the summer months, a babysitter whenever I needed him just to come in because I didn't have anybody else to watch the kids, if there was work things that were going on, or if I had to travel for work. And there was no other involvement when it came to co-parenting and communicating in regards to the care of the kids. So when Isaiah was having issues, during the first earlier parts in elementary school, which I have to shout out the elementary school because my son actually was kind of going through, because he was more aware of what was going on. And for him, he was internalizing a lot of the things that he was feeling. And what the school did, the elementary school, what they did, they actually had group counseling for kids that were in homes of parents who were separated or divorced. And they would call it ice cream conversations. So they would go, it was like every Wednesday, and they would eat ice cream, Isaiah and these other kids in similar situations, and they would just talk about their experiences at home. And then also the school had like a big brother program. So they would have like a gentleman that would come in, they properly vet these people, right? And he was Isaiah's big brother. So he would come in and he would sit and eat lunch with Isaiah. Like, oh my gosh, I'm about to cry because they just had such care and awareness that, these children needed like the father figure, and some sort of mentor. And my son wasn't getting that from his dad. I don't know why I'm crying, y'all, but that was something that I'm so grateful for, because it gave my son a little bit more confidence, because he was kindergarten, elementary age, but he was there the whole time that we were kind of going through the woes of the relationship. And when his dad left, he couldn't properly kind of articulate what he was experiencing. So he was struggling a little bit in school. But, going back to all of that, the fact that he was struggling in school and dealing with just maintaining his grades and things like that, it was not a discussion that I had with his father. I would make him aware, but it wasn't that, okay, we need to make a decision. My son needs extra assistance because the school is trying to say that he might be ADHD, which was not the case. I went through that whole process, a whole other conversation, different episode that I can talk about it. But even navigating that, it wasn't as if I talked to my children's father about any healthcare issues, any educational issues, any extracurricular things. The only thing I would do is saying, I need additional monies because I want to put Isaiah into this. I want to do this. I want to do that. And most of the time, I would say that he would appease and he would kind of just do what he could do. But there have been situations, especially financially, where he would say, well, no, I'm not going to pay it. No, I'm not going to give because I don't have it. But then again, if you're not paying like what you're supposed to be court order paying, you're paying way less than that. And then you don't want to assist with any type of additional things that might be healthy for the kids. And you're refusing to do that. Are you co-parenting? Like, are you assisting? Are you considering these kids as your family? So these are some of the things that I've experienced and walked through and did with my ex-husband in regards to getting him to kind of do things. And I was really earlier on in the point of making him do. Like, I felt like, just like I could make him change when I first got married to him, I felt like I could make him be more involved. I could make him, okay, you need to talk to Isaiah about these things. Okay, Isaiah might need to live with you because he's acting super off the chain when he was a teenager and I don't know how to deal with this. I felt like I could make him do these things. But then I began to realize, like, I set a high bar for my ex-husband to kind of be a father figure for my children. But based off of what we were experiencing, observing, based off of my kids and what they were saying about just different things they experienced with him, how he was just not super involved. Even when they were with him during the summer, like, he would just check out. He wouldn't be around. There's no food in the house, just certain things that they would say that I was like, you know what? I cannot have an expectation for him to parent my kids as if he's an actual parent, as if he's the actual father figure instilling wisdom into their life. I just put the expectation way down here, way low. And I remember I was actually coaching a young lady who was going through something similar of what I've experienced. And she was just super upset because the father of her children, he was just having all of these crazy demands and things in regards to how they should co-parent and things that he wouldn't do when she needed assistance, when she needed help. He would just make her jump through all of these hoops, and she was trying to figure out a way to make him. And I was trying to tell her, you know what, you can't make a person do. You just can't. Like, they have to decide within themselves if they're going to be involved or if they're not going to be involved. And if they decide that they're not going to be involved, if they're going to be removed, if they're going to try to cause you extra issues, then you've got to plan in order to overcome that. So for me, when I dealt with my ex-husband in regards to him not being involved in the care of my kids, when it came to school, when it came to health, when it came to just all of the things, clothing, like financial support, I just kind of let it go. I was like, in my mind, I'm just going to be in a place financially, in a place where I don't ever need him for help. If I needed somebody, then maybe I'll go to my parents if things were really bad, but I'm just going to let him be him. And when my kids got a little bit older, and there were situations where they would come home and they would just cry about certain situations of things, and be super upset about their father and just his unawareness of him not being involved and him kind of putting other people ahead of them and me having to walk my kids through that. I would have to be just very prepared to love on my kids extra hard, to love on them as much as two parents can love on a kid. I had to be both, to be very intentional on putting my son into sports and just making it happen. We did flag football and I paid for all of that out of my pocket. Even though I invited his dad to come in and to watch, he would never come. And then me even trying to find male mentors for my son and just having these conversations with gentlemen and saying, okay, do you mind? Can you? do as far as me kind of vetting people that would be someone that can kind of assist my son and help him through some of the difficult things that he was experiencing, especially as a teenager, I would never go to his father. I would never set an expectation. If I asked for something and he did it, it was like, okay. But if I asked for something and he didn't do it, it was like, okay. I was never surprised at the level or the lack of level of care and attention and fathering that he did or did not do. And so that's been my co-parenting kind of experience. And I'm being very general when I talk about it. But again, it's because that's all I've known. And for a long time, I thought we were co-parenting because we were in a way kind of getting along. But I was getting along with him because I just didn't want the extra stress of having to fight another battle. Here I am raising these kids pretty much on my own anyways. And so I don't want to fight with you. So you do you, sir. And I'm just going to make sure that me and my household and my children are taken care of. So, he went and he lived his life and he did whatever he wanted to do. And again, during the summer months when the kids came, he conveniently had a female there that was staying with him or was there often. He had one girlfriend in particular, which, I felt was overstepping a boundary when it came to her involvement. But I remember, and I talked to my daughter about this recently, one instance where she actually was getting baptized and I invited her father to come up, didn't have the expectation that he would show up. And I've never met this female before, this young lady that he was dating. And when I say young lady, she was a young lady that he was dating and she had kids herself. But I knew that she was kind of around the kids, my kids. And so when I asked him to come, my expectation was just for him to come. And when he came with her and he came with her kids. I was super uncomfortable because I didn't fully know her. I remember us standing in church and for some reason we were like sitting, the church that I was at was what you probably would consider a mega church. But for the baptism and that church service, they came and I remember we were sitting like close to the front and her like standing beside me with her kids or me helping her get her kids checked into the daycare and her standing beside me and him there and me just feeling super uncomfortable. Like I did not want her there, and then even when my daughter was going to get baptized, I had to go and get my daughter dressed. I had to go kind of behind the scenes and we had access to the back part of the pool. So instead of her standing in the front, and I think he was the one that was standing like in the sanctuary, but she came around and in the back and was there with me and my kids. And so the special moment that I wanted to have with like the family, my daughter's father, myself, and my son was kind of tainted because there's this person that's not even a part of our family that was there. But again, he never asked what I was comfortable with. He never realized, okay, let me properly vet these women that I'm interested in and that I'm dating. I honestly think, and this is just my opinion only, that he was not comfortable or did not know how to be by himself with the kids, especially when they were a little bit younger, that he had to have somebody to come in that was more mothering, that understood how to raise kids, because maybe I don't know if he knew how or if he cared to know how or cared to learn. Um, because I could tell you maybe at least three women in particular every time that I would drop the kids off or we would meet mutually or the kids would be dropped off at my house, that there would be another female that would be there. And it would be just for the summer. And, during the school year, when the kids were with me for the majority of the time, he wasn't even in a relationship. So, that was kind of the thing that I had to navigate through. But then I realized that, he's just more of a glorified babysitter, if anything else. And again, it's one of those things that is very unconventional. I just felt like I had to go along to get along, and I was in survival mode, and I was just thinking, okay, whatever I can do just to make sure that me and my kids are safe. And then me fully understanding and realizing that I can't make this man do anything. So whatever he decides that he wants to do in his life and for his life, who he wants to introduce in his life and attempt to introduce into my kids' life, the only thing that I can do is pray. And the only thing that I can do is just be very mindful of making sure that my kids kind of, one, telling my kids to take care of each other when they're with their dad and at their dad's house and look out for each other. And then two, just listening to my kids, when they kind of talk back about their experience for the summer. But again, that was, some of the things that I experienced in the process of co-parenting. But, I always have to come back on and give y'all some advice. One, don't do what I did. So if you are like going through this process of co-parenting and you want to make it easy and you don't want to fight and you don't want to instill certain rules or parameters or boundaries, I would suggest or make a suggestion that you think otherwise. Because you want to make sure that your kids are safe. You want to make sure that both parents, you're doing your part and the other is doing their part. Unless you just want to just completely cut the person off and be a solo parent. And there is a term that is a solo parenting where people decide that they just don't want to deal with the other person. They just want to parent the kids on their own and not have to deal with the father or the mother. So again, that's something that I would tell you just to kind of consider. There's so many different aspects of help that you have that I didn't even know I had access to when I was going through all of this. I would say, as you're co-parenting, of course we understand you got to put your feelings aside. You got to put the kids first. What's best for the kids? You want to make sure that your kids are healthy. You want to make sure that your kids are whole. You want to make sure that your kids are safe. And so these are necessary conversations that you have to have with the other parent in order to make sure that it's a seamless process as much as possible. Because again, it's all about the kids. You're disrupting their lives, right? Because of a decision based on whether it was a healthy decision that you made. For me, it was a healthy decision to go through a divorce and to raise the kids pretty much on my own. But they still had their father, and I still wanted to make sure that they knew their father. But I would tell you just to kind of make sure that your kids are first and foremost in every decision that you make when it's regarding co-parenting, and making sure that you, again, not get caught up in your feelings, make sure that you're setting your boundaries. And then another thing is making sure that you're not speaking negatively about your ex in front of your children. I think for the most part, I did a good job there. But there are some aspects where I would get super frustrated with certain situations. And a lot of it had to do with just the other party on his side that would kind of insert herself. And she didn't need to insert herself in the care or in the way that I communicated with my ex-husband. And so with that being said, there was things that I was super frustrated about that I would say. But, now that my kids are older, and now that my kids kind of see a lot of the things that I have experienced, I can have more of a adult or mature conversation with my kids. But, if you're talking bad about your ex in front of your kids, especially if they're young, then you're putting an extra burden on them, making them feel as if they have to pick sides, right? And I never wanted that for my children. So a lot of the frustrations that I had with my ex, I really tried my very best not to say a negative thing. If it was negative, and yeah, I journal. So I would write down my little things. I would call someone on the phone and talk about it and just get my frustration out the best way that I could. Like me and God, like I talked to God like he was a good friend, like a girlfriend, and telling him a lot of the things that I was going on and dealing with. But then again, another thing that I experienced was the kids kind of playing us. And so just making sure that, you're parenting in a way where the kids are not dictating what it is that they want, and trying to get their way because they can kind of play one parent against the other. I've experienced that. And so I've had to communicate a little bit better with the ex in regards to, okay, this child is trying to play us. So I need to make sure the discipline that I implement here at my house, that you're following through and following suit. Sometimes it happened. Sometimes it didn't happen. My children, I feel like, got away with a little bit more at their father's house than they did here at my house. That's a whole other conversation. And then I think also because, there's a lot of help and there's a lot of resources now for people that are going through separation, divorce, and trying to navigate the co-parenting relationship, that if you need assistance, and if the other parent is open to it, go to counseling together, specifically for co-parenting. I think the court systems do have some sort of advocacy where people come in and they actually help you navigate that as well. So those are some of the takeaways. I feel like I feel like every time I'm on here, I kind of just ramble, but I try to share a little bit about my experience, and I can kind of go in and share so many more stories about co-parenting. But I think the next time I'm on here, I really want to dig into when the other parent is kind of in a relationship and my experience with navigating the many women. Let me stop. It wasn't really many, but maybe enough to put on one hand that I've had to kind of navigate through him in relationship and my kids being around that other, and personally how I felt and how I dealt with it. So I think that'll be something I'll focus on a little bit more in the next episode, on how to deal with when the other person moves on and how to navigate through that. I talked to my daughter yesterday about that and a particular thing that she did that really hurt my feelings. But again, we'll talk about that more on the next episode. But I want to know if this has been helpful to you all. Again, I feel like I kind of just ramble through a lot of what I'm saying, but for me, this part and this aspect of what I've experienced as a single parent, it's all I've ever known. You have to understand that. So all of this, I felt like maybe was possible a norm, but now I'm becoming more and more aware of just the basic relationship that I've had in this co-parenting, single parenting journey is not the norm. That other people experience and do stuff that are a little bit different than what I've kind of did. And the decision that I made to kind of just keep the peace and not make and not institute certain things that maybe I should have was just me in a self-preservation survival mode and doing what I thought was best at the moment. As much as I can be disconnected from you, but still kind of communicate because you're still the father of my children, that was the route that I was going to go. The route that was still a little bit difficult, but I didn't have to fight, right? So, and again, when it came to the financial aspect of it, me deciding not to really pursue a lot of the things that I had rights to was an efforts of me keeping the peace, because I just didn't want to fight and I didn't want to be threatened, because believe me, I have been threatened in regards to the financial aspect of me pursuing child support on a more serious level. But again, another story for another time. Lessons. Co-parenting isn't personal, it's parental. You can't force peace, but you can protect your peace, right? So that's what I did. Kids don't need perfect, they need consistency. So as much as I could provide consistency in my household, I did. And the only consistency that we had throughout the year with co-parenting was the summer times that the kids were with their father. And then, when the kids came back home, kind of having to reset them into what the norm is for our household. And then when you show up healed, it changes the entire energy. So it took some time for me to kind of get it and mature to healing when it came to communication style and not blowing up and fussing and fighting over the phone with my ex, especially when it came to co-parenting and making sure that he was taking care of my kids. And so I had to kind of grow into that. And once I did, and once I took off a demand for him and managed my expectations to how he showed up, the energy changed. A lot of things kind of went a little bit more smoothly. It didn't mean that I had to take a little bit more responsibility and plan a little bit further ahead for some pitfalls. Yes. But was it a lot better than having to fight and kind of crawl and dig my way through to make him do? Yeah, it was a lot easier just to take the path of least resistance. So Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So I can tell you today I have peace with my ex. We talk every once in a while, but now that my kids are older, we don't have to talk as often. And that was a piece that I had to gravitate to and gravitate towards, because again, even though this is a journey of single parenthood, it's also a journey of healing. Because of what I experienced. And so it took me a while to get to a place of peace, but I can say today that I'm at a place of peace. So I hope that this has been helpful for you all. Again, this is me just sharing my story, my journey. Next episode, I'll talk more about just some of the things that kind of impacted me in a way when it came to my ex kind of moving on and having to manage his relationships that he was in. Did I have to manage it? Me managing my emotions, right? But it was a lot more that went with that. So until the next time, you all stay well. Thank you again for hanging out with me here at Candidly Single Mom, and I will see you all soon. Take care.